Welcome back to Central Valley Talk, a truly international talk show about books and authors and publishing and people who help you get published and people who help you do stuff after you've been published. So many things go into it. We've had our next guest on, I'd say, several times, and probably one of the most fascinating guests we've ever had. Our guest is Alex Bennett. Do I say that right?
You said it right, correct.
Alex Bennett. Now, you're a bartender, you're an author, you're a storyteller, and I've watched you on Facebook and Instagram a little bit, doing a little, what do you call it, a podcast?
Been doing a lot of podcasts, yeah, and thanks again for having me here. You know, this is always the first interview I ever did, so I always appreciate coming back. It's like coming home a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
So it's an honor. I appreciate it. But yes, to answer your question, I've been doing a lot of podcasts, trying to promote the book, and I get on it, and you know, I tell everybody the benefit of being a bartender, being a storyteller, to being an author, is being a bartender has actually prepared me for the next part of my life. And I really look forward to doing the podcast to tell a lot of stories, you know, try to get some laughs, try to make something poignant, and give some advice.
Yeah. Now, you're a storyteller, really, is what you are, I would imagine.
That's really what you are, yeah.
Now, did your storytelling evolve out of being a bartender?
You know, that's actually a good question. I was always a reader, and being a reader growing up, you know, you kind of want to become a writer and be a storyteller and that sort of thing. But, and over time, I did get certified to teach English and like learn how to teach people how to write. So that's kind of a part of it too. But yeah, being a bartender, you know, you're an entertainer. Mm-hmm. A lot of what you do, really, you are on a stage in a lot of ways. And so being able to tell a good story, you know, a good story can make people laugh. It can bring people, you know, out of a depression, or, you know, it can just kind of help give them some advice on getting through their life, or even just a little thing, you know. It's funny, if you know a good story told at the right time, it can make a big difference in somebody's life.
Yeah, it really can. And do you read the people when they come in and sit down and kind of figure out what their mood is?
Oh, yeah, that's always a big part of being a bartender. And I say the experience behind it, you know, teaches you a lot of human nature. Now, I spent a lot of time behind a bar, so I like to think I've picked up a lot more of that than a lot of other people have that don't have the experience. But definitely, you know, you get some people, they come in, they sit down, they want to be left alone, they want to have their drink and kind of, you know, think about whatever's on their mind. Other people, you know, they come down, they want to sit down, and you start chatting away with them, you know. And that is a part of the job, is learning that sort of thing. Yeah. Now, I have learned that when you have somebody who is sitting down and being quiet, you know, maybe you give them a little time, and then you kind of ease into it and chat with them a little bit and see if a conversation evolves from there. And that happens quite a bit. You know, people, if they're having a bad day or they're going through a bad situation, a lot of times they have a hard time opening up to it. And I found that a lot of people will open up to a stranger about something that they wouldn't tell a friend or a family member because they're afraid it would get back to whoever it is they don't want it to get back to.
I know, yeah.
You know, and if they find that they have a stranger that they can kind of open up to, you know, it does lead the conversation that way.
Yeah. Now, Shot of Oakies. Of course, I know what it's about now because you and I have talked so many times, but tell our viewers what that is all about.
So I play with the history of whiskey. You know, whiskey's been around for 800 years or so in Britain, and it's a very murky history. And really, I'm more specific about bourbon. And bourbon's been around since about 1785 in America, but before that, it was already kind of a thing. Different people had picked up different parts of the process of making it. And then by 1785, it kind of evolved, and everybody said, this is what bourbon is. Mm. And so because it's such a murky history, I can play with it. What I do is I go back to 1743. At the time, it's the last true Scottish rebellion against the English. So that was a small part of a much larger war. The whole world was at war. And I got a young Scotswoman in America who wants to make whiskey, and so she's kind of stumbling on the process of making bourbon. And at the same time, there's an Irish pirate, and every time she hears about an English ship that has a barrel of her Oakies aboard, she seizes it, she accuses the captain of smuggling, and she executes him. You know how guys are. The more dangerous something is, the more we're going to want it. So as her legend grows, the legend of Oakies kind of grows. The stories cross the Atlantic. They reach an English pirate hunter who's fighting the war. But at that point, if you want to know what happens next, you got to read the book.
Got to read the book. Now, Oakies, does that refer to the barrel?
That refers to the barrel. So what had happened was, you know, back in the day, you couldn't trust water. So if you add a little bit of alcohol to it, it's going to make it safe to drink. So if they were making a batch of whiskey, they wouldn't give much thought to the barrel they were putting it in because, it wasn't going to be in there that long anyway. And the reality was they just used barrels because it was easy for one man to roll with. It had nothing to do with the aging process. So if you were making a batch of whiskey and you had a barrel made out of pine, you'd fill that up, you send it on its way. You can imagine how it might affect the taste, but they just sort of dealt with it,
Yeah.
But then I get to America, they start making barrels out of white American oak, and they fill those up, and they send them on their way, and they get to wherever they were going, and everybody was like, wow, man, this is great. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. So they associated it, and that was the second step in making bourbon. And then the third one came about when you had your white American oak barrel, but it was filled with pickles or herring or crabs. You can imagine how that would affect the
It had previously been filled with.
Yeah.
I had never even thought of that.
Yeah, because that's what they would do. They would reuse a lot of this stuff. Back then, it wasn't like it is now where you just go order it online or something like that. You had barrels, well, that's what you were going to use. So what had happened was they started charring out the inside to get rid of those lingering flavors and odors and realized, wow, man, we really got something here. So that's kind of how bourbon was born.
Crazy. Who would have known?
Yeah.
Well, the author, Alex Bennett, would know, that's for sure. Now, I have this slide. Tell me what it means. It says, follow Literary Booze on Facebook, Instagram, and X. I guess X is formerly known as Twitter?
Twitter, yeah. I finally did a Twitter page, too.
Nice.
And Literary Booze is like my social media personality, I guess I'd say, where every month I highlight an author, and I do like quotes and facts about their lives and stuff like that. This month it's T.S. Eliot from Narnia, and if you go there, you like T.S. Eliot, or if you like authors in general, I always post a different one every month, and then I use it as like a platform to anytime I'm doing an interview, or sometimes I do dramatic readings, or if I have a book signing, I'll post on there as an announcement. Most of my regulars, most of my followers I met at the bar. And they always tell me, let me know what's going on, let me know what's going on. And it's just a great way to get the word out to people that know me, but also, to anybody else out there, And if you want to learn something about your favorite author, it's been up there now. I've been doing it since 2020. So there's a lot of authors up there that you can go back and kind of scroll through and look. And if you want to know if I've done an author, by all means, reach out to me, and I'll let you know. And if you have an author you'd like to see, tell me, because I'm always looking for more.
That's great. So we could go back to some old episodes.
Oh, yeah.
And read about an author. That's
yeah.
So you're a trained writer, really, one would say.
Yeah. I have my master's in secondary education, and I'm certified to teach English. And writing and reading were a big part of all that. And that's really, I was looking for a job in education, and this was 2010. And it was the housing market had collapsed then. And suddenly I was one of 1,200 people applying for these jobs.
Yeah.
And so that's really when I kind of decided, all right, well, I'll just be a professional bartender. It was a good job for me at the time. I didn't realize I could do as well as I have. And so I suddenly, dedicated my life to that. But in the meantime, I thought to myself, well, I can always, since I know how to teach people how to write, I can apply the lessons myself. I came up with a story, and I sat down and started getting at it. And that's kind of how I got to today. And for those of you that are curious, it actually took me about 10 years from the time I sat down with my first blank sheet of paper to the time I published the first book.
10 years, boy.
10 years, yeah.
And that was this book, the Oakies, Shot of Oakies?
Well, it's actually a trilogy. It's called The Old Rosie Chronicles. The Shot of Oakies is the first book in the trilogy.
Okay.
And part of the reason why it took me so long is that when you're writing historical fiction, you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
And so I've run into things that I take for granted today that didn't exist back then. And some of those things are actually words. And one of the words was the term shot. And, I had written the entire first book with the idea of my characters, I'll pour you a shot, or we can do a shot, or let's have a shot. And then I had a kid come popping into work one day who said, hey, I heard an origin to the term shot. Do you know what it is? I was like,
No.
I didn't know there was an origin to the term shot. There's actually two of them. The first one goes to England, where a shot of alcohol is an ounce. Well, in America, it's an ounce and a half. And they say if you're in England and you want the extra little shot, you better throw the bartender an extra little shot. So it kind of refers to tipping. The second one goes to the American West, where a shot of whiskey was 12 cents and a 45 caliber round was 12 cents. And since cowboys didn't carry money, they carried bullets, it became a barter system. I'll trade you a shot for a shot. And the problem with both is they're 100 years after my book, so my characters wouldn't have the frame of reference for the use of the term shot in that sort of context. So at that point I realized, man, I better write all 3 books. I better run into all the issues I'm going to run into. I better straighten it all out. Because, and one of it, part of it for me as a reader is when I'm reading a book and I get to the end and suddenly the Superman character shows up to save the day. It drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, if I'm going to have somebody in the 3rd book who's going to be important, I better at least reference that person in the 1st book, introduce them in the 2nd book. So that way when the 3rd book comes around, you go, okay, I get it. It makes sense, you know. And so that's part of the reason why it took so long.
Now, I forget sometimes, Alex, when I have you on the show, because I let you go and you can tell all these great stories and these great definitions and things we didn't know. But I always forget, we're here to sell your book. There it is on the screen. Tell people, where do you find the book?
You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or the Exhibitus website. Exhibitus is the publisher website. You know, I always say, too, if you come into the bar, I always have copies on me, and I'm happy to sell them across the bar, too, and I'll sign it for you at the same time, you know. But, yeah, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and the Exhibitus website are the 3 main outlets you can get it on.
So who would read this book? Is it somebody who loves history, somebody who loves alcohol?
You know, I'd say it's a pretty broad category that way. You know, if you like pirates, I mean, there's a lot of pirate stuff. And I don't think we've talked a lot about the history of pirates on our show, but there's a lot of research that I had to do with that interests people. And one of them is like Anne Bonny. You know, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, were there any real female pirates? Because I have a female pirate. And there was. There was actually several of them. Anne Bonny was one of them, which is a very murky history. She was married to a guy named Calico Jack Rackham. And Calico Jack was actually executed, and his bones were hung in gibbets, which is the iron cage that you see in a lot of the pirate movies, on a little island outside of Kingston Harbor. And that cay became known as Rackham's Cay because they left them up there so long. And Anne Bonny was married to him, and she was a very interesting, rough sort of person. They say she dressed like a man, she cursed like a man, and she fought like a man. And the day that they were captured, Calico Jack had actually invited another pirate crew aboard his ship, and they spent the day drinking. And they all got really drunk, except for Anne Bonny and another female pirate named Mary Reed, who was like one of Anne Bonny's really good friends. And that night, a pirate hunter kind of tracked them down, and when they started fighting, all the other pirates were too drunk, and they hid below decks and left Anne Bonny and Mary Reed basically alone to take them on. Now, they lost, and they were captured. And the night before Calico Jack was executed, Anne Bonny got one last meeting with him, and she said, you know, I hate to see you like this, but if you fought like a man, you wouldn't be hanged like a dog. Yeah, so that kind of tells you something about her personality. But that's the thing, you know, if you love pirates, you like this book, because I bring in a lot of that sort of history as well. But if you like bourbon, you know, I talk a lot about the history of bourbon, a lot about the history of Scotch, the different regions of Scotch. And then, you know, if you're a history fan, the backdrop is the, they call it the 45 in Scotland. It's the last true Scottish rebellion against the English rule. But that was a small part of a much larger war. And so that's the backdrop to it. They talk a lot about that. So, you know, if you like any of those things or all those things, you'd like the book.
What it sounds like, Alex, is it sounds like it'd be a great Christmas present for about 10 different people I could think of right now. That I was giving a necktie or a scarf or something. Why not a book?
Not a book. Yep. And I always say I love my cover. I don't know how well you see it here, but like, you know, I actually hired commissioned an artist to do this, and I tell everybody, you know, buying it for the cover and putting it on your coffee table is just fine with me too. You know, you got a true work of art there. Just
like having an art piece out there. Well, I would say this, Alex, to our viewers, don't buy one of Alex's books. Buy 10 of them, or go buy a few so you probably go into people's houses for Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, New Year's. Always take a gift when you go to someone's house for the host, and this would be a great host gift, I think. Alex?
I think so too. I think that's a great idea.
So when you see these orders coming in at 5 and 10 at a time, Alex, you're going to know where they got the idea.
Yeah.
Last thoughts for our viewers?
Once again, I appreciate being here. I appreciate all the support that I've gotten through doing these interviews in the past. I do have the second book coming out right now. I'm currently, I printed up a hard copy of it. I actually went through and read the first book, finished that up the other day. I'm going to go right into the second book now and read the hard copy. It just gives you a different perspective. Yeah. I'm hoping to have it out by April, May next year. There are other circumstances involved, but that's the goal. So if you read it and you want to know when the next one's coming out, you're excited for it, it'll be soon. And keep an eye on Literary Booze, because I will be posting on there when it's going to happen. Very good.
I might submit an author. I read an awful lot, and I might submit an author to you that I'd like to know about their background, and you could do that on Literary Booze.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex Bennett. You're my favorite guest. You always have great stories. I don't even know how we get going on these stories sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. So we will be back with more authors right after this, so please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.